This video showcases two endangered plants of the Santa Cruz Sandhills and explains their role in the larger ecosystem and the importance of stewarding these two species. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, it's Dylan McManus with California State Parks, and right now I am carefully and slowly walking through some Santa Cruz Sandhills habitat in an area that is closed to public access due to its highly sensitive disposition. I know what you're thinking, and the answer is yes. I do have a permit, but I wanted to take this time to share two plant species with you that you've probably heard a lot about, but quite possibly have not had the opportunity to observe them due to their protected statuses and very, very small populations. Of course, I'm talking about the Santa Cruz wallflower, that is this yellow flower behind my shoulder here, and the Ben Lomond spineflower. So let's get started. Okay, first up is the Santa Cruz wallflower. Here it is. What an absolute beauty. This plant is a member of the mustard family, and it's protected under the state and federal Endangered Species Act. The only place it occurs in the entire world is right here in the Santa Cruz Sandhills. Nearly half of this Sandhills ecosystem has been lost since the 1940s due to development, habitat destruction, and improper land management. So, these wallflowers clearly face an uphill battle. Furthermore, there's something called biennial, meaning that they take multiple years, 2 to 3, to mature. And on top of that, they're monocarpic. That means that they die after flowering just once. Okay, just to put things into perspective, because the plight that this species faces is crazy. This wallflower only occurs in the Santa Cruz Sandhills. We've already lost half of that. They can't actually produce seeds until they reach 2 to 3 years of age, and they die after a single flowering period. Dang. These plants support pollinators like checker spot butterflies and native bee and ant species, which in turn can attract spiders, just like the one we see in this clip here. There's an entire world unfolding inside the flowering structure of this wallflower. Now, it's quite easy to recognize how astonishing the ecology of this plant is. It's connected to so many other forms of life, and it's indirectly connected to us as well. Here's what I mean. 35% of human food crops depend on animal pollinators. So, if you enjoy fruits and vegetables, you're actually supporting the pollination process as a whole, and you should also be empathetic towards the food sources of pollinators in general, like the Santa Cruz wallflower. The native ants, by the way, are also experiencing a decrease in population, so the situation between these plants and some of their pollinator species is really not great. The Santa Cruz wallflower, in my opinion, is a great example of how delicately balanced nature is, even if we as humans can't immediately see it. The plant depends on this habitat type, and many other species depend on the plant. Even deer enjoy grazing these flowers from time to time. So, if the habitat or the plant is negatively affected, it's really only a matter of time until these other species are affected as well. That's why it's so important to have protected places like this, where the land is specifically designated as an area of recovery. And it sure is great to know that these particular wallflowers are doing so well here. Next, we have the Ben Lomond spineflower, a member of the buckwheat family. And look at this thing. It is extraordinarily delightful. It turns the ground pink. This plant is federally listed as endangered, and although at first glance it seems abundant, its geographic range is ridiculously small because it only occurs here in the Santa Cruz Sandhills, which we have learned has experienced a near 50% reduction in acreage. This is an annual plant, meaning it completes its entire life cycle in a single growing season. Look how funky these flowers are. It's quite easy to see why it's called a spineflower. At the tail end of the flowering season, these spiky little petals will latch onto the fur of small mammals passing by and assist with seed dispersal. Similar to the Santa Cruz wallflower, the spineflower here is an important food source for many different native pollinator species. Bees, beetles, flies, ants, you name it. And I'm not lying, if you find a blooming patch of spineflower, stop and observe. I pinky promise you'll notice a handful of different pollinators. In part, we can attribute the plant diversity of the Santa Cruz Mountains to pollinator species like these. Now, this is a plant that grows immediately adjacent to trails, so it can be easy to overlook and trample, which is extremely detrimental to a plant with such a small geographic range. Furthermore, they depend on open canopies and the exclusion of fire from land management practices, which effectively removes oaks, firs, and other large trees that provide a lot of shade, has not created a great situation for these plants. These are just two plant species that are in a dire situation and depend on our collective stewardship for survival. We are seeing an increase in the use of fire as a management tool throughout the region, so that's very hopeful, but we also need to be incredibly mindful about our recreational habits. Although I'm filming this in an area that is closed to public access, there are public trail systems very close by that are specifically sanctioned for recreational use. And finding this balance, that between conservation and recreation, is very important. Needless to say, recreation is critical for our physical and mental health. But it's also important to understand that recreating in the correct area on designated trails and doing so mindfully and responsibly is imperative to strike the balance between caring for ourselves and also caring for this sensitive landscape and all the life that depends on it. That being said, I hope you enjoyed observing these two endangered plant species and learning a little bit about them. I sure hope you'll continue to lend the Santa Cruz Sandhills some assistance and stewardship, and I look forward to seeing you out on the trails.